Hi, my name is Mark Biernat, and I'm getting a PhD in economics, specifically monetary economics. And in this video, we're going to talk about what is a reserve currency, and is the US going to remain the reserve currency of the world? It's a good question. And what are the implications if it doesn't? So a reserve currency is the currency that is really the standard of value, the unit of account, and in large international transactions such as oil. It's the currency that foreign governments and institutions hold in reserve. And a lot of people are saying the US is the reserve currency of the world, and that it's no longer going to be the reserve currency of the world because it could potentially be replaced by BRICS. Let's take a look at that claim. First, one thing you have to understand is, what is money? Money, according to Carl Menger, 1871, is the universally accepted medium of exchange which has spontaneously arisen through the collective unconsciousness of people and action. So it's not something a government ordains as money, but rather it's what people just start using as money. That's an interesting insight from Carl Menger, an Austrian economist in 1871. It seems obvious after the fact. People use seashells. People use cocoa beans. People use species like gold and silver. These were all once considered money. And what we use as money is not something that a government or a group of governments such as BRICS can just simply decide we're going to challenge the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world. That's not the way the monetary system works. Ludwig von Mises in 1912 reiterated that point, that economics is really spontaneous actions of individuals, not something ordained from above. And Knut Wicksell, Swedish economist, in 1898 reiterated that money is really just a cloak, and it covers the actions of the real economy supporting it. Unless there's a monetary disequilibrium, it doesn't matter what we use: seashells, gold, or fiat paper money. Now, there's an argument, of course, that fiat money is susceptible to fiscal expansion. That's another conversation. But money in itself, whether it's dollars or the ruble or the Great British Pound, it shouldn't matter overall for the world economy. So let's take a look at this claim that the US will no longer become or be the world reserve currency, and why that is not true. In today, 59%, that's the holdings as a reserve currency of the US dollar. Only 59%. Many people fall into this either or black or white thinking, that either we're the reserve currency or not the reserve currency. It's only 59% right now, and that fluctuates. Now, what about the other percentages? The euros maybe 20%, 25%, the Great British Pound 5%, and the Japanese yen 5%. And then there's a lot of other currencies that make up the rest, like the Canadian dollar, the Swiss franc, or other currencies. So it's really a market basket we're talking about already. It's not an either or idea that we're the reserve currency or we're not the reserve currency. Great Britain used to be the reserve currency. After Bretton Woods in 1944, the US replaced it. But what happened to England? How is it existing today? The UK, I would say, is fairly wealthy. My brother lives in the UK, partially, and I don't know if I can afford any of the real estate there. It's a pretty wealthy place, and people live very nice lives. It's a great place to live. If the US was, let's say, replaced from the reserve currency, maybe asset prices would come down. But according to Vixel, it shouldn't affect the underlying workings of people's productivity. Factories would not grind to a halt. Cars would not disappear from driveways. The underlying factors of the economy, as people's intelligence and creativity and desire and capitalism to work, is what makes a country wealthy. Not if you're deemed as a reserve currency or not. So if we're 59% now and we fluctuate from here to here, any replacement, if it ever happened, would be a gradual replacement. And we are certainly not going to replace it with BRICS. BRICS is some sort of fantasy. It is not even a currency. They can't even agree on what it is. They have these meetings and it's high profile news. No, because governments can't manufacture currencies, or a group of governments, that easily. It has to be generally accepted. That goes back to Karl Menger, 1871. Yes, I know what you're saying. The US has outlawed all currencies other than the US legal tender. But still, the whole world accepts it as the default reserve currency to some extent. But if it wasn't the dollar, it'd probably be the euro. The euro is a pretty strong currency, and supporting it are economies like the Netherlands, France, and Germany. These economies are not going away. Neither is the UK economy or the Japanese economy. These are the things that support the currency. BRICS, no. Where does this language come from that the US will be displaced as the world reserve currency? A lot of people are saying the US is just printing money and it's the printing press that's destroying our currency. There's some truth to that, because in times of crisis, it does expand monetarily, but right now the monetary base, according to M2, is decreasing. So if we have a decrease in the monetary base, a decrease in the production, or at least acceleration of the money supply, and increasing interest rates, I don't know where that claim can be substantiated that it would automatically, quote unquote, collapse. Now, you're talking to somebody who, I'm very okay with a classical gold standard. You know, I'm fairly fiscally frugal. I like to see a balanced budget amendment. So I hear you. I know what you're saying. That fiscal irresponsibility starts with a monetary system that can promote through fiat currency monetization of the debt. But that doesn't mean other countries aren't doing it, and it's a relative thing, and we would have to fall very far from the sky to be replaced from 59% to 40% to 20% to 3% to 2%. And I'm quite okay if that happens, because I don't believe in nationalism. I believe in, you know, basically free markets and free movement of labor and capital, and I love my country. But it's not going to have a great impact either way. But where does this language come from? It comes from the idea of this YouTube economist out there promoting a negative narrative in a dystopian, post-apocalyptic economic situation. They promote it to get, people coming back. So people say, well, I got to keep on coming back to hear the negative news so I can be, prepared. But the truth is, life is great. Life continues to get great. And the acid test is you don't want to go back 150 years ago into the past, because technology is improving things. And when you hear people repeating these points, in one sense, they're becoming talking points for the adversaries of the world that are against or dislike the United States just because we're prosperous. So take some objectivity and read the history of economics. Read Karl Menger, what the origins of money are. And even better than Karl Menger is reading the next iteration, Knut Wicksell, the Swedish economist, And read his works. Through his whole life, he studied monetary economics. And he dealt with the same ideas. He dealt with demographic shifts, the gold standard, international conflicts and competition, increasing productivity. What were his conclusions after a lifetime of study? I think you'll find some interesting conclusions. But the main idea here is don't worry. Things are getting better. We are going to continue to be the reserve currency in the foreseeable future. Someday that may change, but if it did, it would be very gradual and perhaps a good thing, or not. There'll always be some winners and some losers in economics, but generally economics, as a non-Malthusian, is a positive sum game. And everything is great. The US will remain the reserve currency of the world in the foreseeable future. Thank you very much.